The smell in the alley was not subtle, but it was sadly familiar. At least it was cooler this time of year, so the smell wasn't getting amped up by the heat. Even if it had been chilled, Laura Baker would be taking whatever she was kneeling in home with her. Garbage, urine, and of course, blood. Lots of blood. He lay where the car had tossed him, legs and arms bent at angles they'd never been meant to go. And because it was New Orleans, jazz played in the distance, the sound carried in by the cool January night air, while their emergency lights pulsed across the scene. She was working on getting his vitals. LaFawn was still trying to find a vein for the cannula. Guy hadn't moved since they got there. Based on his vital signs, he wouldn't be. His lids lifted, the fog in his eyes clearing just enough for him to focus on Laura. His blue lips moved. "You a real blonde." Her lips twitched. "Would you believe me if I said I was?" she asked, her gaze holding his while her hands continued their all-too-familiar task. "I would," LaFawn said, a white grin cutting across his dark face. "Always liked blondes," their victim muttered. The hand nearest her twitched, shifting in the pile of she didn't want to know what it was. He winced, the effort adding more gray to his face, but he managed to lift his hand enough so she could see he held some Mardi Gras beads. She almost sighed. Orleanians did like their beads, but she wasn't going to show him something to get them. "Take them. Pretty girl should have beads." Air bubbles popped in the blood that oozed out with each word. She met LaFawn's gaze, and he half shrugged. "Make 'em feel better, girl," he advised. Laura gingerly extracted the strand from fingers almost as twisted as limbs and held it up. It was strung with what was probably the usual fake pearls, and a huge bauble hung off the crew badge. With a smile hiding her sigh, she slung it around her neck. He was dying, and she'd had worse things on her uniform. "How does it look?" she asked, giving him a sultry smile, even as she returned to the futile task of trying to save his life. The edges of his mouth moved. "Hang on. Bring you luck." The beads hadn't brought him luck, but she smiled again and thanked him. "I'll hang on to them," she promised. "For luck." The man's gaze slid sideways, as if looking to see if anyone was near. The beat cops were keeping the small crowd back. Most people were a couple of streets over on Bourbon Street. The distant music changed to something slower and very jazzy. "Ogre." The effort exhausted him, and his eyes closed. "Hunt. Ogre," he said again. "We'll do what we can," she said, trying to sound reassuring. "Bay." "Bay?" Laura tried not to make it a question, hoping that her calm tone would reassure him. "Baby." Her gaze flicked to LaFawn, who shrugged. It wasn't unusual to call someone baby around here, but the way he said it was neither the affectionate or the creepy version. More like scared. "Baby." His lids flickered, lifting enough for him to see her again. "Pretty girl. Careful." "I'm always careful." Suddenly his eyes opened wide. "Treasure." He said the word clearly, and she shot LaFawn a startled look. Then the man's eyes dimmed, light fading from them as he flatlined. No way to do CPR on a crushed chest. LaFawn shook his head, rubbing his forearm against his forehead in a weary gesture. "He was gone before we got here." Laura started to take the beads off, but it felt wrong to toss them aside, no matter how slimy and hideous, and she had promised, so she flung them around so that they lay against her back out of her way, and then signaled the uniform keeping the crowds at bay. "He's gone." "He say anything about who hit him?" "An ogre," LaFawn said with a tired grin.